So what we need to do is take a look here that's where the ark may have possibly landed. We have to go back to basics and go before the ark landed on Mount Ararat, and we have to ask some hard questions. We're going to take this in a very simple way. So if the ark landed where the yellow arrow pointed to, then we first have to go back to the scripture, Genesis 8:4-5, where it reads, "The ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat, and in the 10th month the tops of the mountains appeared and were seen." Therefore, if it's mountains of Ararat, the argument usually is, well then, why do you say that the ark landed on the mountain or Mount Ararat instead of in the mountains of Ararat? To learn the answer, we have to go back to basics. Let's do this in a simple way. We're going to take a look at how the ark would have landed and how Noah would have seen the other mountains according to this scripture. This scripture is taken from the New English version of the Bible. Now, here's something we need to think about, where it says in Genesis 5 that the tops of the mountains appeared and were seen. Likely may have meant that Noah and or his family and sons, etc., saw the mountains from out the ark window. Now, where the ark landed, they may have also seen it from there later as well. But first, let's consider seeing it on top of the water and what the water would look like according to where Noah's ark would have landed on Greater Mount Ararat. And let's get a view of how they may have been seen mountains of Ararat when Noah was looking at the mountains of Ararat out of the ark window. Now, further explained as follows. Alright, this is the way Mount Ararat looks, and during the flood, Mount Ararat, right there where the yellow arrow points to where the ark would have landed, would have looked like this. And the Bible would have said that the ark came to rest upon the mountain of Ararat, or Mount Ararat. But what we stop and think about here is that the argument in some researchers say that the ark would not have landed upon Greater Mount Ararat because it's a singular mountain. And the Bible states that the ark landed upon the mountains of Ararat, plural, meaning more than just one mountain. Well, let's use some common sense and logic here. First of all, the ark would not have been able to land on mountains or even on two mountains, because most mountains in the world are many, many miles away from each other. But now here we see to the left is Little Mount Ararat. And if the ark would have landed where the yellow arrow is pointing to approximately, that would have been in the sight of Noah's eyes, looking out the left end of the ark toward that area. So we have here Greater Mount Ararat, which is one singular mountain, and then we have smaller Mount Ararat, which is not one. You see, one mountain would be there, and two there would be small Mount Ararat. So even in the minimal scriptural sense, we have mountains, plural, of Ararat. The one points there to the first mountain, Greater Mount Ararat, and the second red arrow points to smaller Mount Ararat. So even in the minimal plural sense, it still qualifies as mountains of Ararat. Two mountains qualify as plural mountains of Ararat, and that's even in the minimal sense, which is also scripturally consistent. But could there have been actually more than two mountains of Ararat? small Ararat and larger Ararat that Noah would have seen where the yellow arrow points to? Let's take a look at this again to show how it's even more scripturally consistent. Now, could there be more mountains between greater Mount Ararat to the right and little Mount Ararat to the left? Yes. Right there where the arrow's pointing are more mountains smaller than even little Ararat, maybe about 7,000 to 9,000 feet in height between the two, and they still could have been seen by Noah looking out the left end of the ark, landing on the northeast side of Mount Ararat. Now here we have larger Mount Ararat. Let's refresh our minds and reiterate and go over that again for re-emphasis. There is greater Mount Ararat, number one, and there's number two mountains, smaller Mount Ararat, so it makes it mountains of Ararat. And then we have the smaller mountains in between little Ararat or small Ararat there, and so it certainly qualifies this as mountains of Ararat. This video was made in a sincere and humble, down-to-earth effort in order to give some very basic understanding and common sense, logical and reasoning abilities as to why Noah's Ark likely may have landed upon today's greater Mount Ararat, and is consistent with Scripture as well. Thank you for your time and watching.